I'm joined on this episode by Sally Fallon Morell, president of the Weston A Foundation and author of the best-selling cookbook, Nourishing Traditions, the cookbook that challenges politically correct nutrition and the Diet Dictocrats. Much of Sally's career has been dedicated to dispelling food myths, most notably that animal fats and cholesterol are not villains but vital factors in the diet necessary for normal growth, proper function of the brain and nervous system, protection from disease, and optimal energy levels. Sally joins me for an intricate conversation on the role of nutrition in cultivating sexual and reproductive health in a world of increasing infertility rates and struggling sexuality. She explores the roles of traditional diets and practices in the promotion of all aspects of health and how our sexual and reproductive health struggles may actually be early warning signs of larger health problems ahead. Welcome to the show, Sally.
Thanks. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I wanted to give kind of a fun little introduction as to why I picked why I asked you to come on and specifically talk about sexual and reproductive health with regards to nutrition and some other lifestyle factors. I have an acquaintance I met a while ago, and she had been telling me the story about how she'd been on a Weston Price style diet for most of her adult life. And she was telling me the story about how when she would go to the gym, she had to be really careful when she was on the floor doing leg raises because she would have an orgasm while she was doing it, which I thought what a lovely problem to have, right? But that really got my wheels turning with regards to the traditional diets that the Weston Price Foundation really promotes and how that impacts both sexual and reproductive health as well as overall health. And what those intricacies and how they intertwine together really mean for people. And just another brief caveat on that discussion. My father had a spinal stroke when he was still alive, 2 hours after he took a Viagra. And that really also got my wheels turning.
Oh my goodness. Yes,
yeah.
That's such a dangerous drug.
Yeah.
I mean, the men aren't getting erections because they can't physically, they're not healthy enough.
Well, right. And I think we'll get a little bit more into what the body's actually trying to tell us in those situations and why overriding it is just creating a bigger problem. But we'll kind of save that for a little bit later. But yeah, so I just really wanted to kind of go into why sexual health matters as much as
I can start with a story of my own.
Oh, actually. Okay. Yeah, definitely.
I think is very apropos today. So I had a dear friend who was a nutritional counselor.
Okay.
And she started getting young men, surfers in their 20s, coming in with erectile dysfunction.
Okay.
This is men in their 20s.
20s, yeah.
And athletic men, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, they shouldn't be having erectile dysfunction. So, of course, they didn't care what they were eating, and they were all using sunscreen.
Oh, okay.
First thing she said is, bring me your sunscreen.
And
the sunscreen actually contained testosterone blockers.
Oh,
okay. It's on the label. But she said, so you stop using sunscreen, and I want you for a month to eat a pound of butter and 6 egg yolks per day. Come back and tell me how you are. And all of them, after a month of doing, they would walk in smiling. You know, fine, you found a solution. You don't have to see me anymore.
Right.
And what is the solution? The solution is animal fat.
Okay.
And a fundamental fact about sex that people have seemed to have forgotten, but it's absolutely in there in the textbook, is that the sex hormones, including testosterone, what are they made of? They're made out of cholesterol.
Right.
Okay. And to make them out of cholesterol, we need some other nutrients. One of them is vitamin A, which we get exclusively from animal fats and organ meats like liver. And zinc is important there. We get zinc from red meat and shellfish. And any kind of trans fat, will interfere with the production of sex hormones.
Okay. So there's
So
good
what's
fats.
happening? Yeah.
There's good
What's
fats and
happening?
bad fats.
Yes. So what's happened in this country over the last 100 years is that we have stopped eating animal fats, stopped eating organ meats like liver,
Mhm.
stopped using butter, stopped eating eggs, said they want you to eat cereal,
Right.
And it's been a very slow, insidious effect on all young people, but especially our young men.
Yeah.
And then you have a young man who can't get it up there. He's not normal anymore.
Right.
And this leads to some terrible behaviors, aggressive, horrible behaviors, and a lot of tragedy.
Yeah. 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 And if you can talk a little bit more about cholesterol, because I know that's kind of been demonized, and I think there's some controversy. A lot of people don't know about where the definition for high cholesterol came from.
Yeah. So cholesterol is a large molecule, and it was one of the first molecules that we learned to measure in the blood. And it's also a molecule unique to animal foods. It's not in vegetable foods. It's not in vegetable oils. So the budding industrial seed oil industry, starting with cottonseed oil, and then they started using corn oil and soybean oil and canola oil, thought to themselves, this is very ingenious. How are we going to sell this newfangled oil when Americans are cooking in lard and using butter?
Mm-hmm.
And so they demonized cholesterol, and they started talking and saturated fat, because two things that you don't get in these industrial seed oils are cholesterol and saturated fat. Right. And they started a campaign to demonize these two substances. There is absolutely no basis in fact that they are bad for us. They've been in our diets for thousands of years. What's new to the diet are the industrial seed oils.
Okay. And
we have seen over the years the substitution of vegetable oils for animal fats in the human diet. A big change came in 1984, because up until that point, all the French fries and fast food, fried food, was done in tallow. Okay. And that's a healthy, stable fat. And then that was changed to trans fats. So you start to see a lot more sexual dysfunction after that.
Okay. And there's something that happens when you heat those oils too, right?
Well, they've already been heated 5 or 6 times
before then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The trans fats are not created by heating; they're already created.
Right. Okay.
I mean, the heat is involved in creating them, but other things are involved also.
Okay. Sure.
At the same time, this benighted idea that saturated fats and cholesterol are bad started to be applied to babies. Now, one of the things that's very high in mother's milk is cholesterol. And mother's milk contains special enzymes that ensure that the baby absorbs 100% of the cholesterol.
Okay.
Part of that is so the little boy can make testosterone. A boy baby in a normal situation, being breastfed or getting real raw milk, produces as much testosterone as an adult man. Up until age 6 months of age, the little baby boy should be producing a lot of testosterone. And that programs the baby to express male characteristics of puberty.
Okay.
Now, if the boy is not getting cholesterol, he will not be able to make this very essential testosterone that programs him to be a man later in life.
Okay.
And when you look at infant formula, which is supposed to be this scientific formula, there is no cholesterol in infant formula for human children in this country.
Okay.
No cholesterol. Now, if you are raising animals and you buy milk substitute, which is formula for animals, the fourth ingredient is animal fat.
Okay.
So scientists know this. They know that you need cholesterol, animal fat in the formula for babies.
Mm-hmm.
But you see, there's not a lot of money in sick animals,
Mm-hmm.
but there is a lot of money in sick children.
Yeah.
So it is absolutely criminal that the FDA allows baby formula made out of skim milk and vegetable oil. That's what they're made out of.
Oh, geez. Yeah. I was reading a statistic too. Dr. Shauna Swan recently wrote a book called Countdown, where she notes that human male sperm count has gone down 50% in the last 40 years. And says that if we stay on this trajectory, we won't even be able to reproduce the old-fashioned way in a matter of decades. What does that tell us about the changes we've seen in our environment and food system? And yeah, I don't know what her statistics specifically were on testosterone, but I would imagine those have also been affected.
Well, there's a lot of emphasis put on xenoestrogens, estrogens in shampoo and sunscreen and that kind of thing, estrogens in plastic bottles and in plastic packaging for baby food.
Okay.
So, and I think these are terrible, but I don't think that's the main cause of the problem. I think the main cause is the children are not getting animal fats.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even if the mother's breastfeeding, if she's following the dietary guidelines, she'll have milk that's deficient in cholesterol.
Mm-hmm.
So we have created something, we have demonized something that is absolutely so important for our children's development and sexual health. And we're, paying the piper now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The other thing, of course, is soy.
Right.
And soy, I would say that soy is a much greater source of xenoestrogens in the diet than plastics. And I'm not, I think we should minimize our use of plastics, but soy contains estrogens.
Mm-hmm.
And these estrogens are not only in the soy protein and so forth, but also in the oil. They are fat soluble after all. So if you are giving your baby a formula that has made with soybean oil, and most of it is,
Mm-hmm.
Not only are they getting no cholesterol, but they're also getting this big load of estrogens. And it's not very popular to say, but we really have this tragic condition of gender confusion today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's not that you want to exclude these people in any way, but I think if you asked most of them, would you rather, know what your sex is and feel comfortable
Mm-hmm.
in the body that you start out with? Most of them would say yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we definitely need to know how to feed our children so that they do feel comfortable in their bodies.
Definitely. And I had read somewhere even that some Zen monks eat soy on purpose to reduce their libido.
Right.
Yeah.
But they have to reduce their libido because they grew up on a normal diet and they have libido.
Right. They have it to begin with, certainly. So yeah, that's really interesting. So what problems with sexual and reproductive health, what do they tell us about our overall health and functioning of other parts of our bodies?
Yes, I think that's a very good question. And I think it's interesting to look at Chinese medicine in this regard, because Chinese medicine believes that sexual health is centered in the adrenal glands. Well, they say the kidneys, but it's the adrenal glands. And that is a source, the adrenal glands are a source of energy and, get up and go. And nothing can happen without good adrenal health. And so much that we do in our diet today is really bad for the adrenal glands. And of course, starting with the vegetable oils, the soy and so forth. But then there's other things. One of my big soapboxes, and don't win any friends for this, is coffee.
Okay.
Coffee and tea stimulants, because basically what they do is hammer your adrenal glands to pump out energy. And then that's the adrenal medulla. Mm-hmm. And then the adrenal cortex, which is where the testosterone is produced and estrogen, just gives up. It's just becomes exhausted. You have adrenal exhaustion. So I'm very concerned about young people starting to drink coffee very early, the caffeine in the energy drinks. I mean, some of those little cans, buzz cans of basically caffeine is what it is.
With the Red Bulls and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
These should not be allowed on the market. They certainly should not be allowed for young people to consume them while they're developing, while their adrenal glands are developing. Sugar, of course, does the same thing, but I don't think sugar is quite as jolting to your adrenal glands as caffeine.
Okay. All right. And you mentioned xenoestrogens a few minutes ago. Can you define what that means for anybody?
Okay,
who's
so
not familiar?
xenoestrogens are estrogens that come from outside the body.
Okay.
And this is nothing new in the world. Actually, plants, when they're stressed in periods of drought, produce a lot of estrogens, and that acts as a kind of toxin and protects them. And then some plants are extremely high in xenoestrogens, like soy, which is 10 times higher than, the next, I think, peas or something. So, and even peas, were noted as an anti-fertility agent. If you want not to get pregnant, you ate a lot of peas. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I did not know that one.
Yeah. So they're all through nature, and people understood kind of instinctively that you didn't eat certain plants.
Okay.
A lot. You certainly didn't eat a lot of them.
Okay. All right. Can you tell me, how does focusing on treating infertility bypass what the body is telling us about maybe going on at a deeper level?
Well, the real crime about the infertility treatments is they don't start with nutrition. And I'm not saying that nutrition can solve every one of them, but we've had so many members tell us that they couldn't get pregnant till they got on our diet, which, of course, minimizes soy, eliminates the vegetable oils, and lots of animal fats, cod liver oil for vitamin A, lots of good cholesterol.
Yeah.
And they get pregnant. And this has to be both the man and the woman.
Right.
It doesn't always work. But it works many times. And that's where any fertility specialist should be starting, but they don't start there because there's no money in that. The money is in the IVF treatments and so forth.
Okay.
Now, I do know, I have two friends who had babies by IVF. They were Weston Price members, and they did our diet at the same time. And the babies were beautiful. One of them did die of breast cancer later on, which is a risk factor for IVF.
Got it.
So,
interesting.
but the other is still doing fine. So I'm not saying don't do IVF, but I certainly wouldn't do it first. I would try the diet first. And if you are going to do it with our diet.
Okay. So it shouldn't be the first tool in the tool bag.
Absolutely not.
Okay. All right. Further down the line. How does one's health during pregnancy and even prior to conception impact a growing fetus?
Okay. So this is our big emphasis at the Weston A. Price Foundation, producing healthy children. And we go by the universal practices of healthy traditional peoples who had a period of preparation before pregnancy, usually 6 months, where they ate special nutrient-dense foods. These included foods like liver, fish eggs, so caviar and pate is the way I like to think of it. Okay. A special type of butter coming from the cows in the spring. They ate the organs of the shark, for example. They made shark liver oil. So there were these special nutrient-dense foods that they ate in preparation for pregnancy, 6 months. And all of these foods are very rich in cholesterol, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin K, minerals, zinc, and they're all foods we're being told to avoid.
Okay.
And I can tell you, there's one really horrible thing that happened. It was back in the late 90s. There was a study at Harvard where they found that women who were drinking skim milk couldn't get pregnant. And if they switched to whole fat dairy foods, I don't know if you're nodding your head, if you remember this one, his name was Trevorrow.
Okay.
And they got pregnant, and it was very embarrassing to the establishment to realize that the diet they're promoting leads to infertility.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, okay, so if you're having trouble getting pregnant, well, okay, you can have whole milk and cheese and ice cream until you get pregnant. And then you go back to the low-fat diet that we're recommending. And don't you think that the kind of foods that get you pregnant are the kind of foods that your baby needs to grow?
Right.
Healthy in the womb. Yeah.
And if it's fostering that part of your health, it's probably fostering every part of your health too. Then.
Exactly. And the baby's health. So we have this special pregnancy diet for men and women at least 6 months before conception.
Okay.
For the woman while she's pregnant. And one of the things we emphasize is salt. It is appalling that pregnant women are told to avoid salt. Salt is critical for neurological development.
Mm-hmm.
So salt is have raw milk, lots of butter, liver, cod liver oil. These babies that are born are absolutely beautiful. And then you can continue this diet while you're breastfeeding. And then the first weaning foods for babies are high in cholesterol, like egg yolks and a liver puree.
Okay.
Not what they're selling in the grocery stores.
Right. And back to the salt note too, I think salt has gotten, reduced to this kind of black or white idea when there's so many junk foods with poor quality salt and large levels of that poor quality salt in them, that's sort of been relegated to apply to all salt rather than good quality sea salts and so forth that you would use in a whole foods cooking sort of way.
Well, we definitely recommend whole unrefined salt, which has a lot of magnesium. By the way, if you're eating a normal amount of salt, which is about a teaspoon and a half a day, you're getting twice the RDA of magnesium.
Okay.
Salt.
Okay.
So we definitely recommend plenty of salt in the diet. You don't have to cut back. But I would say we need to count our blessings. One of the ways the modern diet is so superior to back in the Middle Ages or whatever, is that everybody has salt.
Mm-hmm.
It's cheap, it's plentiful, may not be the best kind of salt, but everybody gets salt. And that's how they control people back in Roman times and medieval times. They withheld salt.
Okay.
And salt was very expensive and they taxed it. And this is why the Romans wanted the Dead Sea. Because they needed the salt for their armies.
Okay.
For the meat and everything. So today everybody has salt. It's very cheap, and it's just a blessing of the modern age. But of course, the better the quality of the salt, the better.
Yeah, great. I'd like to talk a lot about regenerative farming because I know I was a vegetarian for several decades, and my biggest barrier to making the switch back to eating meat again was just understanding how to source ethically raised animals, because I wasn't willing to buy conventional meats and go that route. What impact might conventionally raised animal foods have on sexual and reproductive health?
Well, for sure, they're giving some estrogen-like substances to the animals, and especially pigs, fish, and chicken are getting lots of soy.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the eggs, it's in the meats, in the skin. So that soy is there, even if those estrogens are there, even if you're eating the animal foods.
Okay.
Now, one of the things that we've done at the Weston A. Price Foundation is create a network where people can buy directly from farms, and so they know exactly what they're getting. It started with our campaign for real milk, and we have a website, realmilk.com, where you can go and find raw milk in your area.
Okay.
We now have an interactive map, very nice, but also the farms doing the raw milk are doing meat and chicken and everything.
Right.
So,
okay. All right.
we have a really big network. We have over 400 local chapters. You can call your nearest local chapter and they can tell you where to get these foods.
Great. All right.
But I received a very sad letter the other day, a woman who's basically was falling apart, and she mentioned some guru, and he was telling them, if you eat meat, you'll have a heart attack. So it's ongoing. This lie is continuing.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Um, yeah, I remember I went to the Weston Price conference a number of years ago, and I remember there being kind of this overarching theme that was kind of just under the surface that, people who ate a similar diet generally did have sort of better sexual
Oh,
health.
really? That was
Yeah.
you picked that up at the conference.
I picked it up with a few of the speakers. It was just flying under the radar. Very
Mhm.
interesting. Are
Mhm.
are there any potential problems with a vegetarian or vegan diet that might negatively impact one's sexual and reproductive
Oh
health?
my goodness, yes, absolutely. First of all, it's a diet without any cholesterol. And even if you make your own cholesterol, it's a diet lacking in vitamin A, true vitamin A, so you can't make testosterone and estrogen. I
Okay.
mean, it is a recipe for infertility.
Okay.
And we tell women, and it sounds harsh, if you are going to insist on being a vegetarian, don't have children. It's not fair.
Hmm.
Not fair to your baby to bring a baby in the world on that kind of diet.
Hmm.
And if you persist in that diet, bringing up the child, you may end up in prison. We've had many, many parents all over the world end up in prison for child abuse because they would not give animal foods to the children, and the children were just wasting away.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
I have a
interesting.
whole file on this, many, many examples of it.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Um, are there any toxic elements in plant foods that can negatively impact our health?
Well, absolutely. And the first, of course, are the soy isoflavones, or the plant types of estrogens.
Okay.
But plant foods have a lot of toxins in them, a lot of blockers. So plant foods contain phytic acid, which blocks mineral uptake, especially zinc. And one of the key deficiencies in the vegetarian diet is zinc, which is
Okay.
critical for sexual health.
Okay.
And there are thyroid blockers, there are mineral blockers, all kinds of blockers in vegetables, and that's why we need to be careful how we prepare them. We're not against vegetables, but they need to be properly prepared,
Hmm.
usually by long, slow cooking.
Okay.
Those southern greens weren't made into kale chips.
Right.
They were cooked, they were chopped up, and they were cooked a long, long time with fat, uh, bacon or turkey tails or fatback or something.
Hmm.
And they were delicious. And what that long cooking neutralizes the anti-nutrients and releases all the minerals.
Hmm.
And then you're eating these minerals with fats so you can absorb the minerals.
Okay. Okay. And I think what I'm hearing too is there's two components here. There's the nutritive component of supporting the body, and then there's the toxic component of things that may negatively
Avoiding,
impact. Yeah.
yes. Yes.
Can medications negatively impact sexual and
Oh,
reproductive health?
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is not something I'm an expert on, but starting with the statin drugs, what do
Hmm.
statin drugs do? They lower cholesterol, and erectile dysfunction is a common side effect of statin drugs. But of course, we have a drug for you. We have Viagra.
Right.
So a lot of drugs today are treating the side effects
Of
of
the other drugs.
the original drug.
Right. Right.
I shudder. I shudder at the idea of giving any man or woman a statin.
Mhm.
They are absolutely toxic drugs. You need cholesterol for so many things in your body, including feeling good, avoiding depression. In fact, the most read, most popular article on our website is Dangers of Statin Drugs.
Okay.
So people are waking up to this.
And I think there's a more complex relationship in the body of how blood levels of cholesterol that actually are in a higher range in an unhealthy way aren't necessarily coming from dietary cholesterol. And there's other factors in the body that are contributing to the energetic dysregulation or whatever it might be to those.
Well, the real question is, what are dangerous levels of cholesterol?
Right.
And for men and women at any age, cholesterol up to 300 is completely fine.
Okay.
And for women of any age and men over the age of 60, the higher your cholesterol, the longer you live.
Okay.
And that's been shown in numerous studies. Your doctor will never tell you about these studies because he gets a bonus for prescribing a statin drug.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have a particular vendetta about this because my father, at the end of his life, was put on 2 statin drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And poor man, and he had all the side effects, Parkinson's and crippling back pain. And I tried and tried to get him to stop, but I was no match for his doctor. His doctor was a pusher, drug pusher, knew how to do it just so smooth and suave. What did I know, you know?
Right.
But I really would like to see the end of the statin drugs. There is absolutely no reason for them. There's no purpose to them. It's just something they figured out would lower cholesterol, and so they made a disease of high cholesterol. And basically, doctors are bribed into prescribing them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. How does stress impact nutritional status?
Well, stress, of course, depletes nutrients, and our stress hormones, guess what they're made out of? Cholesterol, just like sex hormones.
Right.
So when you're under stress, you need more of these animal products. You need more cholesterol. Your cholesterol probably goes up because you need the cholesterol to deal with the stress and make stress hormones.
Right.
There was a wonderful study of students. They tested their cholesterol every week, and about halfway into the study, everybody's cholesterol went way up.
Mm-hmm.
And they realized it was midterm exams.
Uh-huh.
So the kids were under a lot of stress, and the body, in order to deal with the stress, produced more cholesterol so they could make stress hormones and get through their exams. Okay. And what would have happened if they'd put these students on cholesterol lowering drugs? Mm-hmm. Well, they probably would not have been able to get through their exams. They would have freaked out, dropped out, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So goodness knows we're all under a lot of stress today. The world is a very stressful place. And you need more cholesterol, not less, to deal with this.
And that's interesting. You say that about how the cholesterol goes up with stress as a positive compensation mechanism. And I remember when my father passed away, that was just a very, very taxing year on myself and my whole family. But I, get that tested every year, and I very distinctly remember that year. My cholesterol was significantly higher than what it had been prior to or after that. And I was eating more saturated fat and cholesterol than I ever had in my life. After that, when it went back down after the stress normalized.
Yes, right.
So.
I heard a story of a woman who went to get her cholesterol tested. And by the way, for a woman, there's absolutely no reason to ever get your cholesterol tested.
Okay.
Any doctor who's doing this is incompetent, doesn't know what he's doing. But she got her cholesterol tested, and it was in the high 200s. And he said, well, your cholesterol is very high. Let's put you on a statin. She said, now, wait a minute. She said, my husband and I are planning to get pregnant this year. Oh, he said, that's okay. When you get pregnant, you can come off.
Mm-hmm.
But these statins are class X, whatever you call it. I mean, they cause horrible, horrible birth defects. Mm-hmm. And if you get pregnant while you're taking one, you're very likely to have one of these birth defects.
And what does that say if something's going to impact a growing fetus, how we kind of discredit that those similar effects may not be happening in our own bodies?
Right, exactly. But the idea that this doctor would prescribe this drug to a woman of childbearing age. Yeah. And, they want to have, there was a lot of talk about having them over the counter, but that has died back. And I think it's because they are so, they cause such terrible, terrible birth defects that I think the pharmaceutical company realizes they don't want the word statin associated with birth defect.
Right.
In the public mind.
All right. Makes sense. You've mentioned vitamin A and zinc and a few others earlier. Are there any other vitamins and minerals that are crucial for reproductive and sexual health?
Well, probably all of them. Probably
Okay.
all of them. But the three that we emphasize in the Weston A. Price Foundation is vitamins A, D, and K,
Okay.
because these were the vitamins that Dr. Price found were so high in traditional diets. And then the foods that they chose to have healthy babies were extremely high in these vitamins. And they form a kind of triumvirate. Vitamins A and D are signaling molecules.
Mm-hmm.
And then the vitamin K tells the proteins what to do after being signaled by A and D. This is why you don't want to take too much D or too much A or too much K in supplement form.
Okay.
And one of the things I'm extremely concerned about, people suffering from COVID or trying to protect themselves from COVID are taking up to 10,000 units of vitamin D a day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something we do not recommend. You'll end up with a deficiency in vitamin A and probably vitamin K. And it's just, you need to get these vitamins from food.
Okay. And I think with the COVID situation, people are more cognizant of the vitamin D levels. What specific foods might people eat more of to get more vitamin D?
Well, we recommend cod liver oil for A and D because
Okay.
they come together. Poultry liver, so duck fat, goose fat, chicken fat, and the fat and the liver of poultry is our best source of these three vitamins together because they're really nicely balanced in poultry liver and poultry fat. So eat the skin on the chicken, cook in duck fat. All of these are great. Lard is another great source of vitamin D and vitamin K.
Okay.
And probably a little vitamin A also. I had a Hungarian friend years ago who told me, she said, in Hungary, when we cook liver, we always cook liver in lard because we think if we don't cook it in lard, it's missing something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, beef liver is very high in A, but it's missing the vitamin D.
Okay.
When you cook it in lard, lard is a real powerhouse for vitamin D.
Oh.
And so they cook those together. I think that's kind of neat.
That is.
And lard has vitamin K in it too. So.
Okay. And can you tell me why is vitamin K so important?
Well, now vitamin K was called Activator X. Dr. Price didn't know what it was.
Okay.
And it really was a wonderful writer, Chris Masterjohn, who figured this out for us. And he figured out the relationship. So you have A and D, which are the signaling molecules, sort of have hormonal type of effect, but then they need to tell the cells what to do, and that's where vitamin K comes in.
Okay. All right.
And all of the most delicious foods have vitamin K in them.
Yeah.
So goose liver, duck fat, chicken skin, lard, aged cheese is another wonderful source of vitamin K.
Okay.
All
And there's vitamin K1 and K2, correct?
So K1 is the plant form.
Okay.
And that does have a use in the body, but the real powerhouse is the K2, which is the animal form.
Okay. And that's easier to get from animals that have been on pasture and in sunlight, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, there's a story I tell in my book, Nourishing Traditions, about the Native American. They had a treatment for infertility. And if a couple didn't get pregnant, they went on the bear fat diet. Nothing but bear fat for a month, and that always solved the problem.
Wow.
So we had bear fat tested, and it was the highest vitamin K food we'd ever tested.
Interesting.
Yes.
That's probably hard to source in our times, though.
I know, but lard would be very similar.
Okay, so
going back to the fertility treatments, the fertility clinics, I mean, this is where you need to start. You need to get these couples on very high fat diet.
Okay. Are there nutritionists now who are specifically specializing in reproductive health?
I'm sure there are. And the way you find them is you call the local chapter nearest you. They're posted on our website, westonaprice.org.
Okay.
And the chapter leader usually knows where the physicians are.
Okay.
But you know, this treatment, you can do it yourself.
Right.
You don't need a doctor to tell you to eat butter and egg yolks and cooking lard.
Right. Right. And doctors certainly have their place. And, you know, I think sometimes maybe people think I'm critical of doctors in general, but some of the most
But
brilliant
we
people
are.
I know are doctors. Well, yeah, we are, but some of the most brilliant people I know are doctors, but
Yes.
they have their place in the system, and I think we've given too much of our power away
Yes.
from taking on our own responsibilities and accountability for our health. So,
Yeah.
Anyway, so what impact does the microbiome have on endocrine and reproductive health?
Okay, well, that is another subject, but a very, very interesting one. And, you know, we've been talking about the traditional people all had these animal fats in their diet. Something else that they all had in their diet, without exception, was fermented foods.
Okay.
Either fermented vegetables or fermented meats or all kinds of fermented foods. So they were getting a dose of beneficial bacteria every day. They were getting their probiotic pill in their food.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have a good gut flora, we are producing a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Hormones and substances that help us feel good. I'm sure that they help our sexual life, and they also produce vitamins. They do, for example, vitamin K. Can be produced in the gut. So gut health is extremely important. And as you know, if your gut's not right, you feel terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So that has been a big emphasis for us.
Okay.
Is gut health.
And
another big component of our diet is bone broth.
Okay.
Which is full of glycine and other components that heal the gut.
Okay.
And help you detoxify.
Wonderful. Wonderful. What can you tell me about sunlight? Because I know that's important for creation of.
Well, sunlight helps you produce vitamin D, but I think has many, many other roles. I think we should be out in the sun every day. Yeah. You know, we forgot one thing in talking about sexual health and fertility, and that's the birth control pill.
Oh, yeah.
And I never thought my son would say this to me because, my kids kind of, oh, mom, and then I'm too, I'm too strict or whatever. But my son and his wife have two beautiful children. And he said, Mom, most of our friends can't get pregnant. Mm-hmm. He said, I think it's because the wife took birth control pills. Mm-hmm. And Colleen never took birth control pills because she thought they were dangerous.
Yeah.
And I never thought I would hear him say that. But apparently it is really a huge problem in these women who've taken birth control pills. Yeah. Now we've had women recover with our diet, but it takes time.
Yeah. Yeah. We could do a whole other episode on that. Colleen sounds like a very smart woman, but and the back to the microbiome conversation. I've read a lot about how the pill even has detrimental effects on the digestive tract. Yes. And we tend to think of this, with tunnel vision, that it's just impacting very specific hormones in the body, but it's affecting everything.
Nothing works like that. Yeah. And you get a situation where you have too much copper and not enough zinc in the body. Yeah. So when you get off the pill, hopefully you never go on the pill, but if you get off the pill, then you need the really high zinc foods. Right. Beef and liver and shellfish.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. And back to the sunlight, I was thinking about, I visited, I took a tour with some clients of mine to a regenerative farm recently. And one thing that the farm owner was pointing out to us that I had not heard before, they had chickens out in their pasture in the chicken coop there. And she was explaining how whatever this, I don't remember if it was organic or some sort of regenerative certification that they have, that the chickens are not allowed to be under artificial light at all, or they lose that certification.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it was very interesting. And I don't think
There was studies done of egg yolks back in the late 1920s,
Uh-huh.
and they found that next to cod liver oil, the most active source of vitamin D was egg yolks, but the chickens had to be in bright sunlight or in ultraviolet light
Mm-hmm.
inside. But
Okay.
I certainly think the bright sunlight's better.
Yeah.
And that's why you pay the extra money and you support the farmers doing this, because when you eat those eggs, you are getting lots of vitamin D plus vitamin A, vitamin K, and all the minerals and so forth. And hopefully you're not getting any soy isoflavones.
Right, right. And
Soy.
I will say eggs are, I think the one place where it's easier to convince people, because I think all you have to do is go to a real regenerative farm and buy some eggs, and go to your grocery store and buy the standard eggs, crack one next to each other and look at the difference in the yolks. And it's
Yes,
mind
yes.
boggling, and taste the
And
difference
just
between the
the
two.
texture too. The
Yeah.
good egg has got a firm yolk and a firm white. They don't look disgusting,
Yeah.
but the
Yeah.
supermarket egg looks disgusting when you crack it open.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't hold together.
Yeah. And I'll say, I think I've said this before, but I was a vegetarian for a couple of decades. And I think my one saving grace for me was that my now ex-husband's grandmother was this neat old Polish lady, and she had somebody in her neighborhood who had backyard chickens, and she would bring us 3 dozen eggs every couple of weeks. So we always had that as part of our diet
Saving
versus,
grace.
yeah. Totally. So
Yeah.
that was wonderful. What or how do vitamin A levels impact hormone production?
Well, all of these hormones we're talking about, all the sex hormones, testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, require vitamin A for the body to manufacture them.
Okay.
And also the stress hormones that we've been talking about that help you deal with stress, they require vitamin A also. And I always say, if you're under a lot of stress, you need more vitamin A. And if you're under a lot of stress, this is maybe why you can't get pregnant, because you're using up so much vitamin A and not having enough left over for sex hormones.
Yeah. Yeah. And back to just sort of the busyness of our general life and stress, I think we've come to normalize having a lot of stress in our lives, and not really taking a step back and evaluating that. I always say I used to always have stress denial. I would try to pretend like I didn't have it, but it was always there. And I at least have an awareness about it now. But I think there's a lot of negligence in, the amount of time and nurturing that we allow pregnant moms to have, especially in those final months. Like, so many moms work right up until they have the baby.
I know.
When they really need to be cultivating.
So, I have a book, the Nourishing Traditions book of baby and childcare, and I talk about that in there. Pregnancy, it's not an illness. And in the old days, they made the women have confinement where they couldn't do anything.
Oh, gosh.
They couldn't go outside. And, that's wrong. We know that's wrong.
Yeah.
But I think in the modern world, we've gone way too far in the other direction, where the pregnant woman can just do anything and she can work up to the last minute. And that's wrong also.
Yeah. And it's about finding balance. I think so many of these conversations end up being polarizing in one direction or the other, when it's about creating balance in our life and in our bodies. And that's where we find health, essentially.
Yes. Right.
So, yeah.
And you'll be a better parent too if you're supporting your own hormonal systems with good diet.
Yeah.
You're supporting that in your children. Your children will be much better behaved. Raising children will be fun and not so stressful. I mean, again, the most stressful thing of all is an unhealthy child.
Yeah.
That you're rushing to the doctor, you don't know what to do about. You're just in constant worry and stress.
Yeah.
And we get parents get their children on our diet, on raw whole milk and plenty of butter. And they say, I didn't realize what a nice child I had, what nice children I had, until I got them on a good diet.
Yeah. Are there things other than like xenoestrogens that can be endocrine disruptors in the body?
I'm sure there can be. I think stress in itself is an endocrine disruptor.
Right. Okay.
I'm sure there can be, but again, I think the solution is always first and foremost nutrition. Make sure your body has sufficient fat-soluble vitamins, sufficient cholesterol, sufficient zinc, sufficient salt. Calcium is important here as well,
Okay.
so that your body can make the hormones it needs in the proportions it needs.
Okay. All right.
Because let's face it, the doctors don't know. We can't say, oh, you need more of this and less of this. We don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And it comes back to, back to the traditional diet, like you said, just living in alignment with how we were designed instead of trying to conquer it or create something new when we already know what worked from.
Well, in many respects, our lives are much less stressful than they used to be. We're warm, we're comfortable, we're clean. We have entertainment. We all have food. We're not worried about where our next meal comes from. We have plenty of salt. So there's no reason to say that modern life is hugely more stressful than life in the old days. I mean, suppose you were living in the slum in London. It was very, very stressful.
Right.
And dirty. And you had horse manure everywhere. And, rats everywhere, and bed bugs. And I mean, our technology has made our lives so much more comfortable and so much less stressful in many ways.
Right. So we've got kind of a different set of stressors.
Different set of stressors, yeah. But it was stressful to work in mines. It was stressful to have one in every two of your children die. It was stressful to be a woman in those days when you had no control over your reproduction at all. I mean, there were a lot of stressful things in the old days.
All right. You mentioned obviously some animal foods earlier. Are there any other superfoods people can incorporate into their diets if they want to boost their fertility and sexual health?
So the number one superfood is liver. And one way or another, you need to get liver into your diet several times a week. And I know a lot of people don't like liver, but you can eat pate. There's a wonderful sausage that we get that has liver in it. It's just delicious. Liverwurst. Another mid-Atlantic food is scraffle, which is consumed all over the mid-Atlantic, and it's made with organ meats from the pigs. So, and it has liver in it. So one way or another, you need to get liver into your diet. Butter is a superfood, especially from grass-fed animals. Raw dairy is a superfood. And another great superfood, shellfish, any kind of shellfish, oysters, mussels. And my favorite seafood superfood is caviar, it was a sacred food in many cultures. At Whole Foods, you can get 2 ounces of white caviar for $10. Wow. It's not expensive. And I have it once a week, and I feel so good after eating that caviar. So it's not hard.
Neat. Okay. Do you have any other tips for our listeners?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's just getting completely off the vegetable oils and eating plenty of animal fats. That would be number one. Yeah. Just simple, clean whole foods is a great place to start for anybody. Well, but it's, people think that canola oil is a simple clean whole food. Right. No, it's not. I mean, it really needs to be the animal food. Right. Okay. All right. Well, the Weston Price Foundation has a conference coming up soon. Can you tell our listeners more about how they can? For asking. We are having an in-person conference in Texas, no masks, 5 wonderful meals and lots of exhibitors, a real old-fashioned conference. It's the 5th through the 7th of November. Okay. Please have a look at our website. Our early bird special is coming up soon. So we'd love to see you there. And we have some really, really amazing speakers this year, including Bobby Kennedy, who will be giving the keynote address at the banquet. Wow. Nice.
Nice. Yeah, I'm excited about
Are you
that.
coming? Okay.
I haven't bought tickets yet, but I'm trying to see if my schedule will allow for it. So,
Well,
and
we
what,
like the personal touch. A lot of conferences have gone, via digital.
yeah, virtual. Yeah.
We virtual, but this is a live conference.
There's certainly a different energy when you can show up and just be in
Yes.
community with other
Yes.
people. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And what is the website where we can find you?
So the conference website is wisetraditions.org,
Okay.
and our main website is westonaprice.org.
Wonderful. Wonderful. All right. Well, Sally, thank you so much for joining us for a conversation today. I think I learned a few things in there, so I hope our listeners got a lot out of it too.
Thank you so much for having me, and good luck in the state of Michigan.
Yes.
Thanks
Thank
for what
you.
you're doing there.
No problem. Thank you.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Any statements and views expressed by myself or my guests are not medical advice. The opinions of guests are their own, and the Body Literacy Podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. If you have a medical problem, please consult a qualified and competent medical professional. As always, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Body Literacy Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and sign up for updates over at jenmayo.com.